And we're back.
Yay! Yay! That was genuine. I am glad we're back.
It's hard sometimes when you've just been talking to little people all day that it's like adults, normal voices. I'm a normal human being.
Yes, I talk to other people besides 3 children on a regular basis.
Anyway. So this episode is called The Dump.
The dump.
And the primary lesson is car washes solve everything.
Yes, car washes make everything better.
Except for Sophie. Sophie, we had to work on car washes with Sophie a little bit because it like legitimately scared her. And it's one of those things that it's like a lot of our other kids are like, yeah, this is awesome. She's like terrified. And
it's better now, but it's still like she's watching the things that come up.
She's still very much like, it can't come in, right? It's not gonna get me. It's like, no, it's a brush. It's like a toothbrush for your car.
But she also doesn't like getting wet. And
This is
it's
true.
kind of like the water's not going to come pouring in too, and it doesn't. So
her brother and sister wanted to do like, let's go to the water park for birthdays, and we're like, water, trying to figure out all this stuff, and gave her all of these options, and she's just like, nope, don't. She would rather doesn't like water as much. Like that's just not her cup of tea. So
yeah. This one was an interesting one though, because the very beginning it starts off. Was it Bluey asked Bandit, "Do you know everything?" And he's like, "Yep." And she's like, "Prove it." And she's like, "Well, Bingo's gonna come in and ask them." And it's that our kids are gonna ask us questions, obviously lots and lots and lots of questions, overwhelm you with questions. That's like their job, is to be curious about everything and ask a million questions about everything.
And I feel like that one of the most relatable parts of this whole, like, of the Blueys is when Bluey is in the back seat and she's asked her dad a question and he doesn't know how to answer. And she's like, Dad, did you hear me? Dad. And then he just finally flips on the windshield wipers so that it kind of breaks that cycle. But it's just like, what do you do? Like, you can't, what do you do in those situations? And, this this episode was very much kind of a, what do you do when you get faced with these situations?
And I do feel like Bandit could have made life a little bit easier for himself by telling the kids beforehand, hey kids, we're going to the dump. Oh look, we're taking some of this paper. I look over because we have a box of stuff we gotta go get rid of. We're taking some of this paper to the dump because we want it to be recycled so other kids can use the draw, because you have a lot of papers already. Yep. Like he could have kind of, and I understand why he didn't. Start off with it thinking, okay, I can hide this and get away with it.
Well, and there's only so much time in the day, and like starting to have some of these conversations with our kids. Sometimes it's we have time and it's important, and then other times it's like we need to get done, we need to get going, and it's just not even not a forward thought in our brain that this is something that we need to discuss. And then they'll ask a question and it's just like, I don't know. The easy answer is because I said so. Or the easy answer is, we're taking stuff to the dump. But the truth answer, being honest with our kids is a lot harder, for one thing. And it also is difficult as they're, when they're younger, get your shoes on. But why? Sometimes it's because I said so. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I can give an explanation, but that's one thing that, and we've done different parenting courses, and I think Growing Kids God's Way hits really hard is the first time obedience, and delayed obedience is not obedience, and kids don't get to ask why. Like, if I say stop, they don't get to turn around and say why they need to stop. If I say don't, and in some situations, that's really important. Don't pick up the knife. Don't,
don't run into the street
after the ball. If I say stop, you need to stop. But I feel like it almost felt like they went really far in that direction where kids are not allowed to question their parents ever.
Well, and the example was always because of life and death situations.
Right.
They have to be able to listen to you and obey you instantly because you see the car coming toward them down the street.
Yeah.
And I understand that. But I also understand all three of my kids are extremely curious. And when I tell them do this instead of that, they're like, well, why would I do this instead of that?
Right.
And they honestly want to know.
And I feel like the Grace-Based Parenting book does a better job a little bit in that, where it's listening, knowing the heart of your child, for one thing, and listening to the heart of your child. And so if it is there's a difference between asking why or questioning a parent in a not manipulative, what am I trying to say? No, you can't make me kind of situation. Why do I have to do that? Versus, I didn't know we had plans to go anywhere today. What are we doing today? Kind of situation where they're trying to work it out. Or, okay, everybody get to the table. It's not dinner time. Why do we need to get to the table? Well, they didn't know that we got donuts, but we got donuts. And so there's situations like that I feel like listening and understanding and answering the questions as they're appropriate.
Yeah, and as appropriate is key.
Yeah.
And in this example, in the dump episode, we have that example of where Bluey's asking Bandit a bunch of questions. And Bandit knows the answer to some of the questions. But then Bluey's like, well, where was I before I was born? And he's like, ooh, ask me a different question. And they're going to ask you questions that either we can't know the answer to, that are literally unfathomable mysteries like that one, or that it's not necessarily appropriate to tell them the answer based on their maturity and ability to handle that.
Yeah.
And so you have to know what their heart is. There was one, and a kid came home from school and said, Mom, what does this mean? And it was a cuss word. And the mom was offended and go wash your mouth out with soap and all this stuff. And the kid had heard it at school and had no idea what it really meant.
Didn't have a clue.
Came home to ask her mom, the one person she could trust to tell her that, and definitely didn't find out the answer and definitely got punished for even asking.
Yeah.
And that's not the sort of approach you necessarily want to do.
Yeah.
Instead, it'd be where did you hear this? What's the context? Okay. And then explaining, kind of like how they do with Dunny in that episode, that's not a word that we use. And then as they're mature enough to understand that, explaining what your methodology is behind that. There's a lot of ones, especially some that are very appropriate, I feel like, for families. You have Bandit and Bluey talking, and are you a goodie or a baddie? Because they saw the poster of the superheroes on the bus next door as they're driving. And, I'm a goodie. Oh, but I also ignore bingo. And it's like, oh, that's not good. You shouldn't ignore bingo, says Bandit, while he's ignoring bingo as well. And it's just things that, it's a really good episode in a lot of ways. One of the biggest takeaways, though, is just don't lie to your kids.
Yeah.
You're setting yourself up to fail.
And the Bible says so many times, don't lie. Don't lie. Don't lie. It's literally one of the 10 Commandments. Don't lie. And I feel like it's weird how easy it is almost to lie to our kids, where it gets us out of situation. The park's closed right now. The park's not actually closed. It's just, it's not something that we're going to do right now.
Yeah.
But the easiest explanation is the park is closed right now. Or, that's just the first one that came to mind. But it's easy to, in these situations, lie. And, we're still looking up articles. And one of the things I saw on several parenting articles, it said, If you have ADHD or your child has ADHD, sometimes we will start talking before we start thinking. And you try to just talk until your brain catches up, and they're like, watch, especially if your kid has been diagnosed with ADHD, because sometimes they don't realize they're lying. They're just talking till their brain catches up and then gets into that situation. And so that was one of those, before you start, okay, would you like to try that again? Or allowing your kid, or allowing and saying, wait a second, I need to start over. And when your brain catches up with your mouth, start over and do it again. And, or figure out a way to, I have to just close it up until everything catches up. And then it's like, okay, or I will answer you in a second, and give myself time to, like, just a second. Let me think about that.
Yeah.
But if your kid has an issue with ADHD as well, that can be giving them the opportunity to try again, or allowing them that grace of, okay, I heard what you said. Would you like to try again? Sometimes lets them get their brain to catch up.
Recalibrate.
Well. Yeah.
Fascinating. That's not the way I thought you were going to go with that. I thought you were going to go with that. Something along the lines of, when you're talking and you're talking waiting for your brain to catch up, you say things you don't mean to, which of course you did, but it was just, I hadn't thought of that in terms of concept of ADHD specifically, where you might just be talking not gibberish, but not the truth.
Yeah. But the article, one of the other studies that we were reading, they studied kids who had a history of their parents lying to them. And it's one of those things where there's so much that happens in our childhood. It's really hard to calibrate. Their parents lied to them, therefore. So cause and effect, they said that it's really difficult to do a study based solely on that. However, they did find in the study that they did, where they asked adults, if they had a parent that lied to them, and knew that the parent lied to them, what. And the two things that they said were, the child was more likely to lie back to their parents as they got older, and became, they lied more often to their parents if they felt like their parents were lying to them. And they had, what did I say? It was
a harder time socially adjusting.
A harder time socially adjusting, because they found it more difficult to trust other people. Because their parents had lied to them, their first thought when they met someone else was, are you lying to me? And that parent lying to the child built that, now everybody's gonna, like, it built that, like, foundation in the kid. And so, the Bible's like, don't lie. You should not lie. And you have we'll get the scriptures here in a second, but, like, how important it is not just to not lie to a spouse, not lie to our friends and the trust that we build, but, like, don't lie to your kids. And I was like, it was kind of an interesting smack in the back of the head a little bit, where it's like, I never really thought of, and I don't feel like we lie to the kids. I don't feel like but not big lies, but the park's closed right now. The I'll say the innocent lies, where I don't really think about it. And now it's like, do I lie to my kids? Am I not honest with my kids? And not in a, we need to tell them everything and they just need to know. No, not that at all. But honesty.
But so in the Bluey mini episode, where Burger Dog and Burger Dog, And he turns off the phone, and then he says that my battery is dead. And they're like, no, it's not. Just because the screen's dark doesn't mean it's dead. And then Bingo says, oh, I know. And she runs off and grabs Chili. And they call Bandit's phone, and it rings. And she goes, are you lying to your children again? And they're like, yes. That is proof that Bandit is not the perfect dog parent.
And in one of the other studies, it said that kids under 4 are much more trusting. And so before they hit about 4 years old, they don't really understand, especially the subtle lies where it's not like, there's a bowl of candy in the other room, and then you walk in the other room and there's no bowl of candy. Like, more of the park's closed right now. You know, they don't connect those dots as well, but after 4, between 4 and 5, they said that's when those trust blocks in their brain start connecting, and that's when it becomes like really detrimental almost in the kid's brain that you're honest with them. That was parenting
which
science
is and that's, you don't want your kids not to trust you. One, because you want them to come to you with those deep thoughts, but also you want them to trust you that when you tell them something, you have their best in mind, and that you're setting yourself up to fail. Now, do you have to tell them everything? No. There's age-appropriate stuff. But you can tell them what's appropriate for that.
Yeah.
You don't have to be giving them 12th grade, overview of everything when they're in kindergarten. You see what I mean? But on the same token, don't tell them blue is pink, right? You're setting yourself up to fail.
And that was something though that I feel like that he hit there toward the end when he said, I don't know everything. And then she asks him a question. She asked him about, do you think somebody else is going to get to draw on our paper? She asked him a question. Yeah. And instead of like lying or, he said, what do you think? And I felt like I really liked that reply because one, he'd given her all of the information about this. Mm-hmm. And instead of him, well, maybe, or this or that, what do you think? And put that back in where she could figure it out. And I feel like a lot of the time it's something we're trying to connect the dots with our 6-year-old that, okay, go pick up, we need to pick up the living room. What do I need to pick up? Look around. What do you notice? Mm-hmm. What do you have the information? What is it that you see that needs to be picked up? If the vacuum ran right now, what would the vacuum sweep up? And so I feel like I really liked that response. Yeah. Because it feels like there's a lot of questions. Our kids ask a lot of questions. And sometimes I feel like they know the answer. Like, yeah. I feel like a lot of the time it's, if they would notice, if they would put these things, and that's part of what makes it a little bit frustrating. It's like, it's right there, but I like that. What do you think? And I really liked how that responded with that.
And I honestly think that we, as I'll say Western civilization, we really I ask a question, I get the answer. It's kind of like I put the coin in, I push the button, it plays. And I think a better way, especially in parenting, is to ask a question with a question, answer a question with a question. Yeah. And I mean, Jesus does it all the time. Someone comes up and asks him a question, and then he asks them back another question. And it's not only a better teaching method, but it also isn't just, why is the sky blue? Because it's having them process and think it through on themselves as well. Yeah. And it does kind of help them internalize it. It makes it different. It does make a difference. Mm-hmm. And it saves you from having to answer a million questions, because then they actually have to think about it before they ask you the next question. So,
sometimes.
Yeah, hopefully it spares you as a parent a little bit of brain processing there. Couple of verses, just 2, because there's a million verses about lying. Colossians 3:9, do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices. And then Ephesians 4:25, putting away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. And it's community again. But it's that social, like, if you know someone is a categorical liar, you're not going to trust what they say. I mean, do you trust any politicians and what they say anymore, right? It's a thing. And it's, if your parents see, and this is important too, it's not just, are you stretching the truth with them, but it's also, oh, you're on the phone with somebody, oh no, I can't, we have XYZ. And no, just tell them no.
We're sick.
But just the kids seeing you do that.
So this last year, I don't know what happened this last year, but we were sick constantly. And so I say that tongue in cheek because it was so like, we were legitimately sick. It's like, I will show you a picture of the thermometer where it's not that we are legitimately having issues here.
Yes. And so if they're seeing that,
just a second.
But no, I really do think, like, not to give yourself an out, but if they're asking you these really deep questions, having those, what do you think? Like, where was I before I was born? You're going to have to figure that one out for yourself, kid. Like, you don't have to know all the answers. And
it's okay if they don't know all the answers either.
Yes.
That I don't know, and you may not know. Some things you're going to have to figure out for yourself. And we talked about that last week, or a couple of weeks ago now, where it was Tim Elmore. And he was talking about, we set boundaries for our kids. And we hope that those are the boundaries that our kids set for themselves when they get older. But they get to make that decision. And when they get older and when they get out of the house, they get to make that decision. And I really liked that parallel of, this is the building that we're building right now, and the walls that we're building. And someday, they're gonna break down those walls and have to put up their own, because our walls aren't gonna be strong enough for them. They're gonna have to build their own walls and decide whether they're gonna be truthful or not. For our house, for our family, we want to build a foundation of truthfulness. We want to build honesty between each other and between our kids, and so that they know they can be honest with us. And that was I'll have to look at the different, where that article was from, but they were talking about how when kids know that honesty is celebrated, and the consequences for being honest are less than the consequences for lying, kids are much more likely to be honest, and much more likely to bring you, they broke the vase. And if you find a broken vase that's been hidden, the punishment is this. Whereas if they bring you the broken vase and say, I bumped the vase with the ball and it broke, and then the punishment is here, then they're much more likely to say, if I come to mom and dad and don't hide this, if I am honest with them, and the punishment is less, they're a lot more likely to be more honest. And we were reading about, I think that was in the Grace-Based Parenting book, the story of the girl who goes off to college and starts doubting her faith. And she was like, I don't know if I'm a Christian anymore. I don't know if I believe in God anymore. It was when those boundaries that her parents had built came down, and she had to decide for herself what boundaries she was going to have and what she believed. She had to decide what she believed for herself. And because her parents had built this, you can come to us with anything and we will be there for you. and we will work with you through it, and it's okay. And they had built that as their family unit. They had built that where it was okay that their child was honest with them. And she comes back from college with all of these questions and all of this, and it broke her parents' heart. However, instead of like judging her and no, you are, you accepted Jesus when you were 4 years old, you are definitely, all of these things, they said, we will pray with you and we will support you and whatever, we can do. And they let her work out those boundaries, but they allowed her to be honest with them without judgment. And that opened the door for her to be able to walk through and figure it out. And she did. And she came back and said, I'm Christian. I do believe in God. And they gave her the material. They showed her what they could show her, and they supported her as she was looking in the different directions that she did. And then she ended up coming back. And they were so grateful, that she did. But it was instead of judging her, and instead of, they allowed her to be honest with them and accepted that okay, she's being honest and we need to be okay with her being honest with us. And then she was able to build her boundaries, and they were stronger when she built them for herself. They ended up being stronger than the boundaries that her parents had built for her.
When you said that about the parents, when consequences are not as severe if you come up as if they're found later, that made me think of when I was a kid, and it was, could I get away with this where parents wouldn't know at all?
Yeah.
And I think, of course, as parents, we want our kids to assume that no, you really can't ever do that. I will always find out, so you better just tell me to begin with. And the actuality is, maybe your kids are going to get away with some stuff. But when you do find something, showing them, hey, if you had come and told me about this, for example, breaking the thing, I still remember I broke a window out of in the church. We were playing outside the church, and I threw the ball, and it went through the window. And it was like, we could run away, and maybe no one would know. We didn't. I went up and I confessed. And I was like, that was me. I'm sorry. I, to this day, have no idea what happened. But I didn't get in heaps of trouble because I did go up and I said, it was me. So when they do come forward and confess, do have that in mind, because it might be like, well, I want to just ground you for a month now. But it's like, you did come and tell me this, by yourself. I didn't have to find it out. So we're going to thank you for doing that. I appreciate you being honest with me. And
there's a point of being honest that I understand that I made a mistake here.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of the difference that, okay, if you knew you made a mistake and you were trying to hide it, versus you coming to me and you made a mistake and you coming to me, there's a repentance almost in that, where it's like, I messed up, what do I do? Kind of deal, versus I messed up and I'm gonna hide it. Mm-hmm. And that,
I hope they fixed that window. No idea what happened. Anyway, so, and remember, if your kid asks you a question, like, can we have ice cream? And you say, maybe, they think you mean yes.
Maybe means yes. At least in the stage that we are in right now, where we have a 3, 5, and 6-year-old. Maybe means yes every time.
Yeah. I've started saying we'll see, and we'll see. I not to sound ominous, but it's like we'll see.
I still feel like it's they're starting to connect that dot as well. I feel like they're just like, oh, so we'll see is the new maybe.
It's not. Anyway, we're right at time, so we'll pray. We'll close it out, guys.
If you guys have any prayer requests, please let us know. We'll be praying for you.
Yeah. Father God, we ask that you be with this group, be with us as parents. Help us to model honesty and truthfulness with our kids. Help us to come to you with openness and honesty whenever we've messed up and ask for your forgiveness. Help us to give grace to our children, the same grace that you've given us. Help us to be better parents than we are. as we get closer to you, and hopefully draw our kids closer to you as well every day. In Jesus' name, amen.
You guys have a good week.
Yeah, see ya.